Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another beautiful episode of Still Positive. I am your host, Dayna Marie, and I'm so happy that you're here. Thank you so much for joining in. I am hoping that you're feeling well. I'm feeling like I'm better than I used to be with this cold that I had. I got over it because you never really know what could happen when you get a cold and you have a chronic illness. It's like, is this the start of something else? Like, where are we going here? So I got through it. I think the sun really helps just to get your vitamin D up in the natural way. So I was doing that, and I feel better. I'm on an uptick, so we'll see how long this lasts for. But today I'm talking to Brandon. Brandon was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when he was 3 years old. So when people say that it's all diet and something's wrong with you because you're not doing the right things, that's a load of BS sometimes. So Brandon is a testament to that. And his journey is amazing. I can't wait for you to hear this episode with Brandon living with type 1 diabetes. Let's be real. People love to gloss over chronic conditions or disabilities with a fleeting comment like, just be positive, or a fleeting insult like, kale will cure you. This is a podcast for when you face a different reality, knowing that positivity isn't a magic wand that's going to cure everything, but a flashlight in the dark that we may or may not have batteries to. Living with a chronic illness or disability makes you feel different, and your difference could be noticeable to others or not, but either can sometimes make you feel invisible. I'm here to tell you that your experience is valid and shared by others in the dark. Positivity is not the missing puzzle piece that's going to solve your life's puzzle, but it can be a beautiful tool that can help you grow. And sharing those experiences can make us grow together. You doing anything fun for the weekend?
I'm yes and no. I live in Southern California, so all the roads get so packed you can't go anywhere. So it's kind of like you have to go somewhere today and
Right.
stay there. So I'm going and meeting friends, and we're going to be at Universal Studios all weekend.
Whoa, that's so cool.
Yeah, so it's going to be packed, but at least it'll be fun. We get to see fireworks, and at least we'll be there. We don't have to travel to there.
Right, right. Then you're just dealing with like lines and stuff like that, but at least you're with your friends so you can hang out.
Yeah, and it's nice because I don't have to be stuck at home.
Yeah. Or drive really that much, just getting there and then you're there. um, Tell me how it's been living with diabetes now that you've had it. How old are you now?
I'm 37.
37. So you've had it since you were 3 years old?
Yep, I was diagnosed at 3,
Oh my gosh.
and you know, it's strange because today I can say I am no longer an insulin dependent diabetic, but
Whoa.
I was for 31 years.
Wow. And what was the switch that made that possible for you?
I had a pancreas only transplant 2.5 years ago.
Whoa. So, first of all, type 1 diabetes is different from type 2 because it affects specifically your pancreas, right?
Yes. Let me specify a little bit more just
Yeah.
because you hear diabetes and everyone just assumes it's because you ate too much. And uh, type 1 diabetes it means that there is some sort of disorder within your body that attacks the pancreas, and it stops its function from being able to produce insulin. So your body no longer produces insulin, and insulin breaks down food into energy and lets you live. And so that's type 1, which means you're insulin dependent. Your body no longer produces enough insulin for you to function. And then type 2 means that your pancreas doesn't quite keep up with what is happening, whether that be from a lifestyle, or it just be from genetics, or it be from a certain age. There's a lot of factors that go into it, and it can usually be controlled with medication and a proper low glycemic diet. a lot of patients who have type 2 diabetes, it can be reversed. So they no longer are dependent on anything versus type 1, where it's something that is never reversed. You have it
Wow.
for the rest of your life.
Wow. And you being diagnosed at 3 years old obviously wasn't because you were eating poorly at three, right?
Right. Yeah. So, and that's when that's the whole like mysterious thing about type 1 diabetes is they don't know a direct cause. They say,
Mm.
oh, it could have been from one of the immunizations you received. It could have been because you got bit by a mosquito that had a strange virus. It could have been that I grew up on a farm and I was drinking well water. Like they can't put something on it. All they can say is it's an autoimmune disorder and my body attacked the pancreas.
Yeah, exactly. It's out of our hands. You just have it, so let's try to fix it, basically.
Yeah, and so it's like let's do the necessary treatments to handle it and
Wow.
do your best, because the more times you don't handle it, the longer, I mean, the bigger issues you're going to have in the long run, in the long
Right.
term. So
Right. And at 3 years old, what were the signs that your parents had said that they saw? Or was it just a regular checkup? Like, how did they know that something was originally wrong?
yeah, so I grew up on a chicken ranch, and so like I was young, I was 3 years old, and I'd be outside running around and playing, and I had animals, and I was always outside doing things. And then all of a sudden, I stopped doing that, and my mom said, you just stood by the water dispenser and drank water constantly. You didn't want to go outside. You just wanted to lay down. All you did was drink, pee, and sleep. And so they
Whoa.
knew that something was wrong. And then they called my pediatrician, who said, take me to the hospital. And they took me to the hospital. They drew blood, ran some tests, and found out that I wasn't producing enough insulin because my blood sugar was extremely high.
Wow. That's so scary for it to be so instant like that, you know? Just one
Yeah.
day.
And it always makes you wonder, like, what did I do wrong? What did I come in contact with? But really, it's nothing. That's what kind of like a hard realization is that it was nothing you did.
Right.
Nothing I did. I just happened to pick the lucky straw. And because it doesn't run in my family, because a lot of times you can say, oh, well, your great grandma had it, but it's not in my family. And so it was just that it's just proof that it can affect anyone.
What, so having it so young though, how did you like, do you remember when you realized that you had diabetes? Like, how was that, growing up like that?
I think the realization that I was different than, because it became so normal right away that it wasn't like I knew a difference.
Mm-hmm.
But I started noticing a difference when I started going to like friends' houses, or friends would go to my house, and my parents would always be there and make sure that I was eating. Because what happens as a diabetic is you're susceptible to high and low blood sugars. And when your blood sugar goes low, it means your body doesn't have enough energy to fuel itself. And you start shutting down mentally. So your logical thinking goes out the window first because there's just not enough energy. And so the brain tries to preserve energy to allow your lungs and heart to keep functioning. So it shuts off non essential functions. So logical thinking goes out the window right away. So you start talking gobbledygook. It doesn't make sense to people. You look like a zombie walking around because nothing, you're pale as a ghost, and you just, it's kind of like when you see someone who's blackout drunk just doing stuff.
Right.
That's what I compare it to. And that you feel like you don't remember anything. You've been blacked out, but somehow your body is like on an auto mode in some way. And so that would happen from that very young age. And it goes from that to passing out to dying. And the only way to treat it is to be able to drink juice or eat some kind of high carb, high sugar, quick dissolving candy, or being injected with glucagon, which is the same thing as like fast acting glucose, and you
Mm.
have to be injected with that. And so my parents never wanted me to be alone with people who didn't know what was going on, and so that's kind of when I knew that I was different. And I never thought badly of it. I just was like, if we have to hang out, we have to hang out at my house. Like,
Right.
because, and I played sports, and my dad was always the coach, and so like just that kind of involvement. It was never like, oh, there's something wrong with you, you can't do it. It was like, yes, do it, but we're gonna be keeping an eye on you.
Oh, that's great though. So you have a really close relationship with your family.
Yeah.
Nice. Oh, that's fantastic. So you were active and you were playing sports and things like this. And there was no, I mean, with type 1 diabetes, there's no real change in that, you're saying. Like,
Right. Like it requires testing your blood, doing injections, making sure you're eating the proper amount of food. But outside of that, you still live the most normal life you can.
wow.
You deal with those low blood sugars and those high blood sugars, which make you feel like absolute junk.
Hmm.
But I think with any chronic illness, there's a threshold that you learn to like push through. Like you start not feeling that good, and you're like, nope, not today, and you just like you keep going, and then at night you're like, oh man, that was rough.
You're right.
but
Exactly.
you still somehow can get through it. And I think that diabetes really taught me from a young age that you could choose to just not feel good and lay in bed, which was okay, or you could choose to keep going. And for me, it played off better for me physically and mentally to push through it than it would for me to just like lay down for a couple hours, because I'd feel like I was missing out on too much and I was doing myself some kind of injustice. um,
Yeah,
and so
exactly.
that's kind of like how I grew up as a kid.
Wow, that's great. I mean, I think that it's so important for you to still feel a part of the community that you live in too, and not just feel like you're shut out and you can't do anything because of this.
Yeah, yeah, and it was a different time too. uh 30 years ago, there was no social media. Chronic
Mm.
illness was looked down upon. You did something wrong if you were a diabetic. Truly, that's how it was. It wasn't like you wore it with a badge of honor, because you were looked down upon at jobs
Right.
because you were a liability, and friends didn't want to have you around because they never knew what would happen. It was a different thing back then, and times have really changed, where I see kids who are my age be diagnosed now, and it's pretty amazing because they have access to the newest technologies, which make diabetes a lot more easier to manage. And like, I'm so happy for the families because they can keep an eye on their kids. And I think because people put that stuff out there for others to see, as a society, we've kind of started to adopt and understand chronic illness better. Instead of looking at it so negatively, we see, oh, it affects a lot of people, and it happens to everyone in different ways, and it's not just diabetes. There are many factors to take into consideration, and so yeah, it's just interesting to grow up like that and to see the drastic changes of it now, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think that people growing up with this, like you're saying, have a lot more access to technologies like checking your blood sugar and all of that stuff that wasn't not available at the time. And I think that that diabetes definitely gets a bad rap. I think that it's one of those that people have this preconceived notion of it that isn't necessarily true. I mean, even reading through a couple of sites is like, it's probably what you're eating. Like, make sure that your diet is this and that and whatever. But it could be a number of things. And it's not solely that. I mean, exercise and all of that can definitely help anyone with their health, but it's not the cure all for a lot of things like this.
Right. And and when even on commercials, you see stuff for diabetes all the time. It's just random commercials. and they don't distinguish between the types of diabetes. There's like 7 types of diabetes, and they don't distinguish, but the main is type 1 and type 2, and they don't distinguish the difference between the two. And then they'll, after you think it's like the greatest thing to ever come out, it'll like start telling you who it's for and what type of people group, and you're just like, but it's not marketing well. And so it's very hard to distinguish between that, so you just assume it applies to everybody. And a lot of people get frustrated with that because it's like, I don't think it's the fear of missing out, but I think it's the fear that their disease is misunderstood,
Mm.
even by the pharmaceutical companies and the doctor and everything like that. And so people get really frustrated with that. Where I kind of take a little bit different approach with it. I'm like, it's an opportunity for education.
Yeah, that's very,
Because
yeah,
if people don't know, I mean, at least let me tell them.
yeah.
It's not their responsibility to really understand, but if they bring it up, let me just tell them the difference.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Just be like a little nudge, like, hey, there's actually other types. So, in that vein, so the other types that you have found that you are actually a brittle diabetic, is that right?
Yeah, so technically when I was diagnosed, it was called juvenile diabetes
Mm,
because I was diagnosed as a juvenile. Now it's just called type 1.
mm.
Then it changed to juvenile onset type 1 diabetes, and now it's just type 1. And then within that there's there's unawarenesses, there's brittle diabetes. And what that means is at some point the body becomes unable to either process insulin correctly or respond correctly to food. And so, because insulin is required to function and food is required for energy, you need both at the same time, and it has to work in tandem. But at some point, my body stopped working correctly, and it was because of a botched kidney stone surgery that set all this in
Um,
motion.
wow.
And I became a brittle diabetic, meaning the insulin I was taking for the food that I was taking wasn't digesting correctly and processing correctly. So it would make me have a low blood sugar known as hypoglycemia. And it would cause me to go from being completely normal to talking to you like I am now to passing out within seconds.
Wow.
And no blood testing machine can keep up with that. No continuous glucose monitor can keep up with that. And it became one of those things where I was well controlled for my entire life. And then all of a sudden, this started happening all of a sudden out of nowhere. And I had to learn how different it was and how to handle that, because I
Mm.
was, I was able to be active. I was able to work full time. I had just graduated law school. Everything was good in life. And then all of a sudden you go from being everything's great to you can't even get out of bed, can't even
Wow.
drive. That's a drastic change.
Yes. And what was that like? Were you still working when you were having these hypoglycemic moments?
Yeah, and that's when I really noticed that it was becoming a problem, because what would happen is I would drive to work, I would start work, all that kind of stuff, and then at some point I would go off. Like my blood sugar would go low. I would do my little pass out zombie person thing, and the day would go by. I don't know what happened. I don't know what I did. All I know is I would kind of eventually come to, and it would be night outside.
Oh my
everyone
gosh.
everyone would be gone, and it
Oh
was
my
like 10 o'clock at night, and I was like, well,
God.
I I guess it's time to go home. And
Oh,
after
wow.
facing that, and then having my body have to recover from that, and then it happening again in the middle of the night, it becomes a cycle where your body just can't recover, and you
Mm,
no longer can do the work, let alone physically get up and make it to work in time, or be a productive member of society. And that was kind of like when I realized, hey, this isn't going as planned. The doctors aren't helping me. So I'm going to have to stop working, and figure out what's causing me to bring me to the brink of death every single day.
Oh my gosh. So how did you did you go to a specialist? Like where did you go after that?
Yeah, so the specialists for diabetes are called endocrinologists or endos, and
Mm.
they are the ones trained in diabetes and understand the endocrine system. However, the brittle diabetes is a very rare diagnosis. It affects very few type 1 diabetics. It's heard of but rarely seen in reality. And so doctors would assume that it was fake. And
Wow.
once they would find out that it actually was happening, then they didn't want to see me because I was a complicated case. And
Hmm.
so, they would refer me to other specialists because they didn't want to deal with me. And so my whole thing became doctor shopping and finding the best doctor to treat me. And I tried everyone. I went to naturopaths because I didn't know really what was going on. I
Mm.
went to different endocrinologists. I made appointments with anyone I possibly could. And it took me almost a year and a half to find a doctor who knew what was going on with me and told me what to do.
Oh man, that's a long doctor shop.
Yeah. And meanwhile, I'm passing out every day. I was pronounced dead while I was found. I didn't wake up one morning. My roommate found me, called 911. I didn't have a heartbeat,
Oh my
didn't have any
gosh.
breaths, and had to be brought back to life. And so like it was an enduring thing. So yeah, so going from this like completely vibrant, lively person to barely being able to function was hard, to cope with. And then being disappointed with doctor after doctor after doctor, that was a whole nother challenge. You start thinking like, is it worth is it worth all this effort,
Yeah,
because it kind of becomes just survival is the
challenge.
basic. It's a challenge and the biggest victory you have every day, and you're just kind of like, well, I survived the day, like what can I expect myself else to accomplish?
Wow. Yeah, I definitely can see that and having that be your everyday that you're fighting with. Like that's your fight or flight is just like make it through. Oh my gosh. And then so you found the specialist and that was that where you got the okay to do this pancreas only surgery or was it one more doctor after that?
Yeah, so I went and saw this doctor, and she was an endocrinologist, and she walked in the room and she sat down and flat out said, "You're a brittle, hypoglycemic, unaware diabetic. I'm diagnosing you with that now." And I was like, okay, like
Thank you.
I don't even know what that means, but good, okay. And she said, "There's nothing we can do for you except try to keep you alive while you get a pancreas only transplant." And she said, "The people that I've seen in your situation have less than 2 years to live, and you will die most likely the next time you have a hypoglycemic episode. And so you need this pancreas transplant sooner than later, and you're going to have to beg, borrow, and steal for it because it's not covered by insurance."
Oh, great. Yeah.
And so then that's, well, how terrible it sounds, at the same time, I was given an answer and a solvent to what I was dealing with. And so I was very thankful for that. I was like, okay, good. Now let me figure out what a transplant even is
Right.
and what it entails. And so then I was referred to a transplant hospital who denied me right away because because of the kidney stone and the botched surgery, they ended up having to remove one of my kidneys. And because I was so unstable with my diabetes at the time, I was too much of a risk to take on, because transplant hospitals thrive on success rates and they're not going to take on a patient who's not going to be successful.
Hmm.
Um, so they denied me right away. And so then I had to go shopping again to find a transplant hospital that would be willing to even talk to me, let alone take me on as a patient, and then be willing to work with me with the finances, because my insurance wouldn't cover it because it's an exception in the Affordable Care Act. A pancreas only transplant is an optional coverage. That's what it says in the Affordable Care Act.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
it's guaranteed to be covered if it's in tandem with another organ or after another organ. It just can't be the first organ that's transplanted into you. Um, so
Very
I found it,
odd.
yeah, it was bad. Um, so I looked everywhere to see what insurances covered it, and all of them claim, yeah, we cover transplants. But when you look at the fine print, they say they don't, because it's optional coverage in the Affordable Care Act. And let's be honest, insurance companies are not out there to really help us. They're out there to make
Right.
money on us.
Exactly.
So they don't want to cover anything. So I found out that it would be $20,000 for me to have all the consultations to see if I could even be determined if I could be a candidate for surgery. And then they would need $250,000 upfront
Oh my
um,
gosh.
to list me. So I didn't have the money. I had just graduated law school and I wasn't working at the time. So I had all the student loan debt and I wasn't working and I felt like an absolute failure and I didn't know how do I even get that kind of money?
Right.
Um, and so that's kind of where I was left. So I found out that I could be seen at Mayo Clinic if we receive the $20,000. Um, and so that's kind of like when I really had to look at things and figure out what am I supposed to do.
And where did you get that strength to say like I need to do this for myself? Because I'm sure that there was a question that you might have had like, do I really want to go through this? And then think about if it didn't work.
Yeah. So it was very difficult because when you're dealing with those types of low blood sugars, your brain doesn't process information well or correctly. And it wants your mind to go to like worst case scenario right away. And physically, you don't feel like putting in the effort that it takes to survive. And so it's very difficult to like look at that and say, yes, I want to survive. However, it was one of those things where I had made it that far. If I was supposed to die, I would have at the times I was really supposed to die. Um, so for me, it was all about getting back to the type of life that I was living before I got sick, because it was really when I was happy. Um, I had found something I enjoyed in life. I had a lot of fun. I went to school to be a lawyer, and it really interested me. And I just thought, I can die on this path of trying to do the best I can and be okay with that versus dying and just giving up, knowing I'm not fighting for myself every day. So it was kind of like a deal I made with myself where even if it doesn't come to fruition, I was okay with it because I did my best efforts
Wow.
every day, whatever it was. Some days I genuinely couldn't get out of bed. I was too beat down. My body couldn't process food. I had no energy. My muscle mass was gone. I had nothing left to give. And some days I could get enough just to go and do the basic needs and stuff like that. But it really came down to me agreeing that I would do my best every day and not give up. And then whatever the outcome would be, I would be okay with it. And that's kind of what I agreed to myself to do.
That's a great way to think about it. Like I tried my best as everything that was pushing against me, I still was trying my best. And that is such a great way to look at it.
Yeah, it's not like, I wouldn't say it's an easy way to
Definitely
look
not.
at it, but it's kind of like when you're brought out of, like it's strange because it's not just about work, but like socially, economically, like everything happened as it was supposed to, and then it was all taken away. And so it
Hmm.
was kind of like, look, that is when I knew that I was happy. I felt fulfilled. I was doing something good, not only for myself, but for others. And so it was like I found a little purpose in life. And I just wanted to get back to that. And so that was a huge motivating uh, factor for me. And so it really, that is all it came down to. At the time, I didn't really realize that that's what I was doing. But looking back at it now, I was like, no, that was my thought process every day. It was about doing the best that I could.
Right.
Um,
1,000%. And I think
yeah.
that it got you to the next step, which was getting this surgery.
Oh, yeah, it did. And it caused me to have to lower my boundaries because before that point, before I really stopped working, and before I found out that I had to get that transplant to keep living, no one knew I was sick. No one knew I was dealing with this problem. No one knew anything that was really going on in my life. And so again, going back to my childhood, because it was something you never shared with people. It was
Mm-hmm.
something you didn't want to show off because you were seen as less than. And so I it was very difficult for me, but I had to make what was going on with me known. I had to tell people, I had to share my story because I had to raise $250,000 on top of $20,000 to save my life. And I
Wow.
was working against time, and I was working against the everyday of having low blood sugars, thinking, well, this one might be the one that does it. And I certainly hope it doesn't. But yeah. And
Wow.
so somehow in the midst of all that, um, I found out that when you're in need of something, people don't know. You have to make it known. You have to ask. You have to make that willful ask. Nothing is guaranteed.
Yeah.
People are going to say no, but there are people who are out there who want to help in any way they can. They just don't know how. And so when you make that ask and you make it known, it is amazing the people that suddenly show up and want to support and help you. And that was probably the biggest realization I had through this process was I thought I was alone in this fight. I had done it alone my entire life. And then all of a sudden I needed people's help. I had to break my own heart a little bit to
Yeah.
be willing to open it up to other people.
Mm-hmm.
But once I did that, it was amazing to see the support of people, which I didn't expect because I thought the opposite. I thought no one cared about others, and
Yeah.
who would be willing to give hard money to help save my life. And people want to, they just don't know how. And so that's really what I learned about that. And that whole aspect of self-advocacy really in my life was formed through that realization. And because of that, I was able to make it long enough and to raise the money within 3 months and
Wow.
to um, have the transplant.
Wow. That's amazing. And it is so true that people really are just looking for this way. They just don't know. Like, first of all, they didn't even know that you were sick, so they couldn't help you because they thought you were fine. But then after, they were probably so relieved. And like, then seeing your progress after was probably the best gift for them. And just knowing that they were contributing to your success and health. That's really powerful.
Yeah, and it's really powerful now too because someone died in order for and donated their organs, and I received one of them. So I'm alive because someone died. I'm
Wow.
also alive because many people invested in me to stay alive. And so now it kind of is like I take that on as a good burden in the sense that I'm living life to the fullest of my abilities every day. I want to make sure I do myself proud. I do my organ donor proud with what I do with my life and how I live my life. And I'm able to show that and demonstrate it to everyone who gave to me that their money didn't go to waste. It went to where it was supposed to go, and it did what it was supposed to do. And so like I'm a living testament that the impossible can really happen. And it's kind of crazy when you think of it like that, but that's really what it was. I was in an impossible situation, and had it not been all those people and that one person on that day who had an injury and died, I wouldn't be alive right now.
Wow. That's a great way to look at it too. I mean, it was unfortunate that they passed, but for you to be able to get that transplant, it just was given you this opportunity. I think that that's really great.
Yeah, it's a morbid yet really celebratory thing to look at.
Hmm.
But I think it's the most amazing and selfless gift that someone can do is to donate their organs.
I agree, definitely. And so, was it after the surgery that you decided to one, be an advocate and then two, write a book about this?
Yeah. So what happened was, so I wasn't on social media. I didn't know anything about any of that kind of stuff because when it came out, when like Instagram really started becoming a thing, when Snapchat started becoming a thing, when Facebook business pages started to become a thing, I was a high school social studies teacher. And so students would find me on my Facebook, and I, I wasn't comfortable with that, so I deleted all my social medias, and I never thought twice about it. But then after my transplant, all those the people that gave money, the people who were praying for me, the people who were sending me good vibes, all that kind of stuff. They wanted to follow my journey and see what I was going through, and that's kind of when I found out how the money was raised, and that was through a friend of mine who put the fundraiser together, who put it online and shared it through social media. And so then that's kind of when I started my social media pages, and it was basically to show people what it was like post transplant and what was going on in my life. And that's kind of what started that aspect. At the same time, when I was looking up pancreas only transplants, I couldn't find anyone who had one. There's no one Googleable that you can search pancreas only transplant and anyone pops up. All you get is statistics and random reports and stuff like that. So it was very isolating in the sense where I felt like I was the only one going through it. I didn't have anyone else to talk to. There were kidney groups and there were liver groups, but there were no pancreas groups. And so it was also an opportunity for me to make it known that this is what I've been through, and I am going to be the advocate of what I've been through and to help people who are in a similar situation. And surprisingly, I mean, surprising even to me, I get reached out to quite often for people who are in a similar situation with being hypoglycemic unaware or being diagnosed as a brittle diabetic or, because I had diabetes for 31 years, people ask my advice on things, and I never thought that that would be who I was. And so, and then lastly, the book happened because the doctor that did my consultation, who I met at Mayo Clinic, like it was one of my first appointments. She saw me 3 months post transplant, walked in the room and started crying. And I was like, oh heck, she's gonna give me bad news. Like this is not good.
Right.
And I was like, what
Doctors
is
never
going on?
cry.
Yeah, it was crazy. And she just said, Brandon, when I saw you, it was like you had no life in your eyes. You looked like you were dead. Like I was surprised that you were even alive then. And she said, when we went to the panel to discuss your case, if we were going to take you on or not, I fought very hard for you because you were young enough, you've lived life enough to appreciate what was going to happen to you. But the issue was whether or not you'd survive long enough to get the call for the transplant. And so she says, seeing you here today, looking how well you do, seeing that sparkle in your eye again, which I never noticed. That was something that everyone always said right after I had the transplant was your eyes, like there's life in your eyes again,
Mm,
which
yeah.
is interesting, right? And so she said, here's the deal. I see too many people give up because she knew the situation and the money that I had to raise and all the hell I had to go through to get this transplant. She said, here's the deal. There are not enough people who have good things to say about chronic illness, um, who are motivating. If people knew what you went through, if people knew that not giving up was an option, uh, they would hold on and be willing to fight a little bit longer. And she just said, especially for people who have been given, who have some kind of disease where they've been given the death sentence, they a lot of times they just shut down. And she just says, people need more motivation out there. So she says, you need to write your story down. You need to get it out there. And I was like, okay.
Nice.
But as I that was her trying to motivate me, which was very nice, and I appreciate it. But it kind of like fed into my mind. I was like, well, let me at least write down everything that I have been through, because I don't want to forget about it either. And then it kind of turned into, well, maybe she was right. And so I talked to other people about it. Eventually it did. It became a book. And it was supposed to come out last summer. But because of everything that happened, it wasn't a good time for a book to come out for me to go and talk to people and try to motivate others. And so now I have the book coming out. It's a motivational book about overcoming the impossible, and it comes out August 7th. And I'm pretty excited about it because I grew up on a farm. You know what I mean? Like, I was supposed to be living on a chicken ranch my whole life, and I ended up going to college, and then I went to law school, and now I wrote a book. Like, to me, I can't even believe what I've accomplished. And then I just want to be able to go out there and just say, hey, because you have some kind of chronic illness, or because you have diabetes, or because you're on a transplant list and you have a 10-year wait list, it doesn't mean you give up. As long as you're willing to fight for that day is a success. Just because it's not perfect, it doesn't mean it's not worth it. And so that's the message I like to go out there and give. And that's in my book. I don't say it like that, but you can see it through what I've been through and my reactions to things. And so I'm really excited about that. So please, if anyone wants any more information about me, reach out. I'm on brandonmau.com. My last name is spelled M for Mary, OUW. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, my website, and you can pre-order my book, or it comes out August 7th on Amazon. I'm pretty excited about it.
Cool. Oh, that's so cool. I can't wait to get a copy. What a great story. Seriously, I was so happy after that call with Brandon. I was feeling so pumped up and ready to go. I was just like running around the house. I was like, yeah, this is awesome. You're right. Like, it really got me going. And, I think that could help with a lot of people in the situations that they find themselves in with chronic illnesses. And I think, living with these circumstances, you have to find other ways and other means to be happy. And seeing Brandon is like one of the things that reminds you of that. And I loved hearing about it. I wanted to hear more. Please make sure to subscribe. Please make sure to grab his book when it comes out in August, or you can put your name in to get one early in the pre-sale, and follow Brandon on Instagram. He's always doing some really cool traveling things that make me jealous. Maybe I'll meet up with him one day and we can go on a travel adventure together. Thank you again for listening to this episode. If you want to hear more of Still Positive, make sure to like and subscribe. We're on YouTube, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter. We're, just doing the damn thing. All over the place. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, you name it, we're there. And so please like and subscribe, leave me a comment. And if you ever want to jump on Still Positive to have a chat with me, reach out. I am mostly always available. Let's see what kind of day I'm having that day, and pretty much I'll always reach out. Thanks again for joining in, and stay sick. Keep going.